This goddamn image changed everything. To some, the very innocent few, this picture is just a chunk of ice floating in a cold ocean. An iceberg. But to me, to us, to you, the enlightened, no, the cursed people of the internet, this is not just an iceberg. It's so much more than that. It's so much more than just a naturally occurring block of frozen water sailing through the Antarctic. It's more than just a literal iceberg. It is a vast, infinite collection of mysteries, secrets, anomalies, trivia, forbidden knowledge. It contains the darkest and deepest stretches of humanity's understanding of everything. Every possible topic of interest, every possible corner of the internet, no matter how surface level or deeply obscure and sinister. Every possible piece of information about any given thing, ordered from most to least well known, like the layers of an iceberg. It is the iceberg chart. You've seen them, I've seen them, we've all seen a ridiculous amount of these things across YouTube and the internet as a whole. Today, I should be able to tell you why. This is Icebergs Explained. Today we are going to take a deep dive into the complete history of icebergs online. These things, like I said, I know we have all seen our fair share of them, but to gain a comprehensive grasp of how they gained the omnipresence they now have online, we need to first understand what exactly are modern iceberg charts. Well, they tend to go something like this. Step 1. Find something you are well versed and interested in. This could be literally anything. Your favorite video game, a movie genre you love, some conspiracy theories you're interested in, music you listen to, political ideologies, internet aesthetics, lost media, your own life, or even the entirety of the history of the known universe. It doesn't matter how niche or vast your topic, as long as you're into it. Step 2. PNG image of an iceberg. In the vast majority of cases, this exact image of an iceberg created by Ralph A. Clevenger. Step 3. Layers, separated by lines, evenly spaced out and descending into the dark depths of the ocean's abyss. Step 4. Entries, made out of text. This is the hard part, and it's what will set you aside from your average normie when making icebergs. You need to gather a ton of pieces of lore, mysteries, trivia, conspiracies, and deep knowledge about a subject. They need to get progressively darker and lesser known the further down the iceberg they go. You better know what you're talking about for this one, because if you don't, oh boy, people will let you know. You are in fact not just a fake fan, but a total fraud. Step 5. Slap some silly images on the right hand side of this chart. Bonus points if they're spooky. And after all of that, you will have what is essentially a stylized fact file. An image full of informational and visual content entirely centered around exploring the furthest corners of a given topic, ordered from least to most obscure, an iceberg chart. Oh, and step 6. Post your iceberg chart to the internet to share with hundreds of thousands of like-minded folks and the people of your fandom. Who knows, your iceberg may even be good enough to get adapted to YouTube video form by a big flashy YouTuber. Dear God. If you were to make an iceberg chart as I described, submitting it to the internet via Reddit, Discord, 4chan, or even icebergcharts.com would enter it into a vast cosmic collection of the tens of thousands of iceberg charts that exist online. A collection that grows with countless new contributions every day. A virtually infinite ocean of iceberg charts. But that isn't truly where the life cycle of an iceberg chart finishes, is it? I'm guessing if you're watching this right now, you weren't introduced to icebergs through image charts like these. I'm guessing most of you found icebergs instead by stumbling upon one of these Iceberg Explained videos. Since the upload of one particular revolutionary, era-defining, monumentally influential video in the summer of 2020, videos explaining iceberg charts have become a beyond viral trend across YouTube. At their peak, these things can net over 10 million views each, which is just absurd. They can be 20 to 30 minutes long, just providing the promised explanation of each one of an iceberg's entries in a timely manner, or they can be, 9.5 hours. What the fuck? Yeah, as this subgenre developed, it went from being of a relatively formulaic structure to basically just, as long as the iceberg's explained, present it however you want. Generally speaking though, Iceberg Explained videos are literally exactly what their title implies. Videos containing explanations for each of the entries on an iceberg, back to back, covering them down from the tip of the iceberg to the bottom of the chart, so the video mirrors the same descent into darkness present in the images. The structure is simple. Name of entry appears on screen, entry is explained by narrator, rinse and repeat from top to bottom, layer by layer. We'll be going more in depth on how the style of iceberg videos evolved, developed and augmented itself over time later. But before diving into the history of icebergs as a whole, allow me to take you through a little emulation of your average iceberg video. Part 1. The intro. Introductions to iceberg videos tend to be very predictable. It's like a minute or two of the video's creator just ticking off boxes. They'll give a brief introduction to the topic they're talking about, as if people clicking on a video that is clearly centered around one niche topic don't already know what said niche topic is. They'll credit whoever made the iceberg image they're explaining. They'll give the mandatory but pretty much obsolete explanation as to how iceberg charts work.
So for those who don't know what an iceberg chart is, essentially...
Then cue some more small talk about how the creator wanted to cover this iceberg, or how they know they're late to the trend, or a painfully unneeded gag saying something along the lines of,
are iceberg videos still even relevant, guys? Well, I'm gonna do it anyway.
Like, okay buddy, we get it, just start the video, please. And with a cheesy one-liner about how it's time to dive deep below the surface and uncover the mysteries of the iceberg, we then truly begin the iceberg's explanation. Part 2, Layer 1 of the iceberg, the skies. Insert happy-go-lucky Nintendo 64 music here. Narration in Layer 1 is upbeat and energetic, and the atmosphere is happy. Now, in the first layer of an iceberg, you can expect a few things you already know as someone avidly interested in the topic. Some well-known conspiracy theories or bits of trivia most of the initiated will know of. The creator of the video will most likely preface at least one of the entries with, okay, you guys probably already know about this one, but basically, before going on to read out a paragraph explaining who Woody is in a Toy Story iceberg. If the video is adapting a good iceberg chart, however, you should still be learning about a couple neat entries, and not just being put to sleep by the most surface level knowledge imaginable. Nothing unnerving or weird to speak of yet, so let's dive a little deeper. Layers 2 and 3, the tip of the iceberg. Layer 2 of the iceberg will see the creator touching on the first of some lesser known theories or rabbit holes within a topic, and layer 3 is largely the same, just naturally with more obscure entries. You'll notice the music in the background creeping slowly away from the happy-go-lucky N64 and elevator type music, and more towards ambient and atmospheric tracks, but nothing trying too hard to be unnerving just yet. As we're going down into layer 3, the creator may even choose to employ one of the classics of the genre, the increasingly monotone and unnerving voice, making everything sound like reading out classified government information. But that shouldn't come into full effect just yet. It could also be at this point that the person making the video chooses to skip some entries or use the infamous
so I couldn't find much on this one, guys.
If anyone knows about this one, let me know in the comments.
line. Layer 4, the depths. Layer 4 is where things tend to get theoretical. It's the layer of the iceberg that acts as the mediator between the just genuinely really obscure and unknown intricacies of a topic and the inevitable deep, dark, bottomless pit of creepypastas, folklore, disturbing theories, and, well, made up bullshit. Usually, at least. Amidst the entries here, the narrator's voice is likely very clearly making the shift from just regular old Joe Schmo video essay voice to the intentionally slow and unnerving narration the genre is ridiculed for. Music is a far cry from what it was at the start. Unsettling Silent Hill, Lavender Town music is starting to creep in. Although the best Iceberg creators will just flood this section with the Yume Nikki soundtrack. And that's a fact. Some cliches like entries with the notorious "do not research" can be seen here, as well as the first of the random creepy entries that were probably just made up for the iceberg, like Trollface predicted 9/11 or Lugalan is gay. Wait a minute. This is usually the last stage of the iceberg where you can sense the creator of the original image had at least a small grip on their sanity. Until layer 5, the abyss, the final layer of the video. Ladies and gentlemen, we are now in full-on conspiracy land. That's not to say in a fair share of icebergs this layer doesn't contain real entries that are just super obscure, but most of the time we're getting some of the most bizarre and morbid concepts ever conceived about a given topic. Or just creepypastas. Or, you know, another one of the Iceberg Explained classics like every copy of X is personalized or something. It's at this point the music and narration is at its most sinister and dark. The voice is deep, slow, trying to be spooky. The music is River Twig's Bed from Super Paper Mario. Or even Creepy Silent Hill playlist. Half of the entries here are just creepy for the sake of being creepy. The layer most likely concludes with a very dramatic readout of one of the more disturbing theories to end the video on a fittingly chilling note. And then, the outro. Not much to speak of there, I mean, it's an outro. So now we know what iceberg charts and videos look like. We know how they're made, we know what they actually are. But to fully understand icebergs, we need to know who, what, when, where, and why they exist. How did they come to be? Who made the first iceberg? When was that? Where was that? Okay, the what and where is kind of irrelevant, but who, why, and when are crucial questions to be asking in order to understand and explain icebergs. Join me, my friends, as we wind the clocks back over a century ago and we explore the history of icebergs. The very first time a person used an iceberg as a metaphor is unknown. Some of you who are more well versed in psychology may say, well, sure, the very first instance of any use of a metaphor is likely impossible to trace, it's just too broad a field to study. But one of, if not the most well-known psychologist in history, Sigmund Freud, is often credited with founding the first iceberg metaphor in his study of the unconscious mind, using the iceberg as a model for the human psyche. Conscious behavior is only the visible 10% of the human mind, the tip of the iceberg, the sub and unconscious levels of the mind stretching deep below the water's surface. However, despite Freud's model being credited as the origin of the iceberg metaphor by basically everyone who mentions him, it actually just isn't. That's one big misunderstanding. See, Freud's work here was done in around 1915, whereas the first documented use of the metaphor was in 1898. Granville Stanley Hall, in his work Some Aspects of the Early Sense of Self, wrote the following passage, which for brevity's sake I'm not going to read out, but you're seeing it on screen, and yeah, this seems like a pretty compelling case for the earliest iceberg metaphor, at least in documented history. Hall then reused this metaphor in a lecture he gave in 1912, and later it was published in his book Founders of Modern Psychology, nearly 5 months after the Titanic sank. Hall's initial use here was likely how the metaphor was first embedded into the Western cultural consciousness. From early 1912 to 1932, a myriad of other psychologists were employing the iceberg metaphor in their works, each generally holding the same idea that an iceberg could be used to represent deeper forces and influences being at play to the observable surface level aspects of a particular topic. Still though, the iceberg was bound to psychology. During the middle 20th century, while scholars prior were simply likening Freud's work to the features of an iceberg, this eventually turned into scholars, perhaps unintentionally, making it seem like Freud himself saw it that way. In 1946's volume of The American Scholar, Carl Binger even writing, "To Freud, man was like an iceberg." It's clear how this misconception came about now. From 1946 to 1979 onwards, this conflation and misattribution of the iceberg metaphor to Freud continued and spread like wildfire, and there were many subsequent uses of the iceberg as an analogy. It's at this point you're probably wondering, Lugalan, why the fuck should I care about any of that? How does any of this have anything to do with the nefarious Pringles iceberg explained? Well, dear viewer, this all goes to show how deeply rooted the iceberg metaphor is in our culture. It has real historical relevance and has stood the test of time as an analogy for the unknown and mysterious for literally over a century. And given we can't even really tell if Hall was the first user of the iceberg himself, it could have existed for eons before that. The iceberg is eternal. 1986, Gary Weaver introduces the cultural iceberg in reference to the 1976 work Beyond Culture by anthropologist Edward T. Hall, where he stated the most important part of culture is internal and hidden, remarking how, to this extent, culture is like an iceberg. He once again confused the origin of the iceberg metaphor to Freud, and himself confused the public with it and Edward Hall. Now, while influential, Gary's iceberg was not the first of its kind. In fact, to find the true first iceberg chart, as distant a relative as it seems both visually and contextually from modern icebergs, we likely must look at this piece of work by Stanley N. Herman in 1971, The Organization Iceberg, detailing the components, structures, and formalities involved in the running of an organizational structure, both overt and covertly. The further you went down, the less obvious things became. Sounding familiar? Though Dr. Joseph Sheehan technically created possibly the first visual iceberg diagram in 1970, depicting the struggles of a person who stutters. But this chart is more dynamic, and the implicit and explicit aren't firmly established in this form, unlike Herman's. I think Herman's makes more sense as the primordial ancestor of modern icebergs than Sheehan's does. The icebergs of this time were still almost entirely academic though, and they feel like a far cry from the icebergs we know today. However, Sheehan's iceberg of stuttering did begin to circulate the early internet in 2003. Even though it was just redistributed for International Stuttering Awareness Day and seen on a small scale amongst online academics, it's still one of the significant advances in the iceberg format. Why? Why, you ask? Why was an iceberg about stuttering doing the rounds on the early internet so important? Well, maybe because it looks like this. Don't recognize it? Okay, let me clean off some of these visual obstructions. This stuttering iceberg is likely the first ever online use of the legendary Iceberg image. Created by photographer Ralph A. Clevenger, this exact image of an iceberg, titled The Essence of Imagination, is one of the most iconic photos of the modern internet. But it's actually not a real photograph. The image was made by combining 4 different photos and 2 different icebergs, put together in a now fairly primitive version of Photoshop to form the iceberg image we know and love. So yeah, when you see this thing from now on, just remember this is a Photoshop job. It's not a real iceberg. Your whole life has been a lie. The image actually netted Ralph around $900,000 in revenues from its use, so yeah, that's nuts. The circulation of Ralph's image, alongside developments in technology throughout the 2000s, made it significantly easier to create image macros and share them with a vast array of online communities. Ralph's charts, as they began being called, were more likely to be made by everyday internet users now, people wanting to depict the analogy for their own purposes, rather than just cultural scholars and established psychologists. For the most part, however, they still remained largely academic, and moreover, they hadn't yet acquired the obscure ordering of entries. One of the more interesting usages of Ralph's charts was the Facebook Iceberg model, published as a part of a collaborative paper called Facebook and Online Privacy, circulating the internet in 2009. The iceberg depicts the fun and networking aspect of the social media sites above the waters, and the huge amount of personal data collected by the company sitting below the surface, a clever use of the format, but not the chart model we're accustomed to. From this point on, icebergs using Ralph's image began to appear more and more and more. So that's how we got from early psychological and philosophical use of the metaphor to its first entering the online world. But how did it then go from an underground niche little academic template to the omnipresent behemoth of the internet it now is? 4chan. More specifically, this 4chan post, titled The Internet More or Less, uploaded somewhere between 2010 and 2011. What board and the exact date it was posted on, unknown. The post, otherwise known as the Dark Web Iceberg. The chart was straightforward, presenting a list of websites one could find across the early 2010s internet, ordered from, and yes, I've been waiting all video to say this, ordered from least to most obscure. Yep, after a century-long story so far, have we now truly tracked down the patient zero of modern iceberg charts? Well, modern, maybe. Iceberg charts as a whole, maybe not. Sheehan and Herman could still be credited for that. From what we can tell about 13 years on, this iceberg likely received a lot of ridicule on 4chan and later reposts to Reddit. Many commenters seem to disagree with its placements in tones that range from amused to condescending. A second version was made soon after, moving around the sites to reflect what was really under the surface. The original chart tried to make out that 4chan was a lot more obscure than it really was. The chart paved the way for successors, such as this piece, another infographic of the ocean, posted around 2012, which also went on to use Clevenger's photo. This is a meme in nature, and deviates heavily from being academic or 100% factual. Now, things were beginning to play into urban myths and colloquial jokes, but still containing dense insider information. It remains unclear as to exactly where or exactly when many of these charts were posted, though it's likely a lot of these began to crop up on 4chan's random board or in several misty, secluded corners of the internet. It's tough to say how popular or influential these dark web charts were in retrospect, and how little archive there is of the forums they were posted to makes the waters murky when researching. But we do know about one particular post that gained notoriety around the same time. Amidst the deep web charts of 4chan, another anonymous user on the site's music board asked one very simple question. Where should I start with Tibetan throat singing? Attached to this title was a depth chart on musical genres, a vertical list of music genres descending from the mainstream and well-known to the most enigmatic, unknown and esoteric. The depth charts using a cliff face or other background image to signify a descent into the obscure, not necessarily using an iceberg, but using the same sort of metaphor. It's not clear exactly when these depth charts caught on, but it was probably sometime around mid-2012. This being the first widely circulated depth chart used the visual of a steep cliff face instead of an iceberg, stretching down into a pit of fire, the final layer being framed as some sort of beyond human enlightened plane of knowledge, comedically and ominously framing the latter entries as some sort of ascension. Some of the charts beginning to appear now did use Clevenger's iconic image, while others just used a big blue background or other similar motifs, but I feel they were all similar enough to fall under the umbrella term of iceberg charts now. In the early 2010s there were few of these things in circulation. If you wanted to see one on 4chan, you'd have to ask. They couldn't just be stumbled upon by accident floating around the ether like they can today. Soon they spread from 4chan's music board to various other forums about video games and other topics, slowly creeping into the corners of each and every niche fandom forum sites were home to. Eventually, they embedded themselves as a commonality across the sites. Every internet subculture seemed to have their own obscurities, and people wanted to dig deeper into their own interests. The trend slowly began to drop its anti-normie sense of superiority and began shifting towards just being made up of genuinely informative and educational charts. This turn in the culture began around 2016, when iceberg charts started to develop their own more substantial, cohesive and consistent character, which made them easy to read and even easier to share, easier to spread and harder to escape. It was only a matter of time before they properly spread outside of 4chan and onto Reddit, where r/iceberg charts was born that very year. The 28th of August 2016. The first post on r/iceberg charts was made by user Fabulous Mustache, a noteworthy early poster to the forum. While Fabulous Mustache was not the founder of the subreddit, the identity of that individual is actually unknown, their account deleted and records of them untraceable even by the Wayback Machine. They pretty much kickstarted the subreddit and set the tone for future posts. However, the sub wasn't really that active initially. There were a few icebergs uploaded here and there, but outside of 4chan, where admittedly icebergs were popping off, the trend didn't really take off. However, icebergs were still developing their own distinct quirks and staples, one noteworthy feature being the use of various images on the sides of each layer, which descended into more and more disgruntled and disturbed type faces, before flipping over again into ascendants. That idea from the first music depth chart living on, again serving to imply that knowledge of the lower levels made you less of a normie and clued you in more to the dark underbelly of a given topic. Now that I think about it, this also kind of established the innate and strange tendency that icebergs ended up developing, that being becoming darker and creepier the further you go down, or just generally holding a sort of unnerving air to them. Like, I mean, not just getting more obscure as you go down, that's the whole point, but like actually intentionally making an effort to become more creepy and more disturbing the further you go down. But at this point, that's such an integral part of icebergs' identity, I can't even begin to imagine them without it. But like I said, icebergs hadn't fully taken off yet, and no trend can really thrive while still being mostly bound to the grimy confines of 4chan. Icebergs hadn't yet been applied en masse to loads of topics. Internet subcultures that ate creepypastas for breakfast though, your Ocarina of Time types, reveled in this format. Smaller, lesser known games got some coverage, but less frequently and only from handfuls of disorganized fans. For 3 years, iceberg charts kind of just existed in this limbo. They weren't the ultra rare format they once were, but they also weren't the cyberspace powerhouse they became. They were just kind of floating around the tides, picked up here and there by experts on a particular topic to compile their knowledge, but they weren't viral at all. Then, 3 years after we left off, something strange started happening. Late 2019, a Nintendo game released over 2 decades ago started becoming relevant again. Super Mario 64 was getting lots of attention online. Various anonymous users began posting to 4chan's video game board, pairing eerie liminal stills of the game's areas with remarkably odd questions and captions. For some reason, these posts resonated with people. This game that was over 23 years old at the time was getting twisted and contorted into themes of a darker and more sinister nature. It was clear to people this game had an undeniably weird aura, and discussions about it were seen across the board. There were so many strange memories that people recalled from the game, and more unnerving and spooky theories and talking points began cropping up. Someone had to begin collecting and compounding them all. Conspiracy theories regarding Super Mario 64 began growing exponentially in popularity towards late 2019 and early 2020. Titans of urban video game myth, like the Wario apparition, L is Real 2401, the Bowser Room, and, of course, every copy of Mario 64 is personalized, were all beginning to gain their footing in the online creepy mystery sphere. Some of these ideas had been present for many years before 2020, but it was just now that they began building up some traction, receiving endless theorization and intrigue from curious onlookers and avid investigators online. Uncanny Super Mario 64 rumors, conspiracies, and mysteries were getting pretty big now. The culmination of a huge influx in the interest and creation of Mario 64 theories collided with over a century of icebergs and created the personalized Mario 64 iceberg. Posted in early 2020 during some point around May of that year, the personalized Mario 64 iceberg image was a collaborative effort between several users on 4chan's V-board. Over countless months of sifting through the bizarre abyss of this one particular game, a collective of fascinated Mario 64 enthusiasts had produced this image. For a long time, the V-board had been thoroughly fascinated by the bizarre liminality of Mario 64 and the many mysteries surrounding it. An iceberg chart of the game was not only natural, but perhaps inevitable. On the 8th of June 2020, the MIPS whole wiki, an entire wiki page on fandom dedicated to Super Mario 64 creepypastas and mysteries, was created. The Mario 64 subculture rapidly spread throughout all corners of the internet, and all of a sudden, the captivated gaze of millions of internet users was concentrated onto this one surreal idea: exploring the deep abyss of Super Mario 64. It was only a matter of time before the internet, no, human history as a whole, was changed forever. The morning of May 23rd, 2020, a further developed version of the personalized 64 iceberg was reposted to Twitter by user MegaX2. This was it, the definitive iceberg, the ultimate setup for one of the most colossal online trends of a generation. Over a century of icebergs, months and months of tireless exploration of the quintessential liminal bizarre piece of media, the perfect storm for the 25th of June, 2020. Our lives were changed forever.
You want fun? Why, I'll show you fun.
I mean, come on. You knew we were going to talk about this video at some point. One man, a YouTube channel by the name Mish Koz, created a revolutionary masterpiece. Mish Koz, who held only about 300 subscribers at the time, uploaded a video that became the blueprint for an entire empire. A simple 35-minute video going down through the personalized Mario 64 iceberg, explaining its entries one by one. Equipped with all the signature elements and cliches we've established so far, this video was ahead of its time. Icebergs being explained was now a real thing. Videos explaining icebergs were about to be the real thing. A month after the video's upload. So, the month following the video, July 2020, only really saw a further expanse of the spooky Mario 64 thing in particular. This video kind of propelled stuff like the Wario apparition and personalized copies into the stratosphere, but its introduction of icebergs to such a vast audience, initially at least, wasn't really picked up by anyone. There were very few iceberg-inspired videos, like a follow-up by Tetrabit Gaming or this music iceberg. Neither of these really followed the format Mishkoz had laid down. It wasn't until the original 64 Iceberg was revisited a month later in early August by YouTubers like Swankybox, Sunflower and, again, Tetrabit Gaming that this trend finally really began to take off. The Iceberg Explained subgenre had finally manifested itself into reality. Icebergs had at last began to resonate with millions of people. Iceberg Explained videos were now the meta. People across all possible fandoms and communities online were now racing to contribute to and create their own iceberg charts and videos, with one of the most sudden and meteoric bursts of popularity in YouTube history occurring with Iceberg Explained videos. First, we got a Pokemon Iceberg video, then a Danganronpa Iceberg video, then Rule. If it exists, there is an iceberg of it. The Minecraft Iceberg Explained, the Undertale Iceberg Explained, the Roblox Iceberg Explained, the SpongeBob Iceberg, the Clash of Clans Iceberg, the Ultimate Kanye West Iceberg Parts 1 and 2, the YouTube Iceberg, the Backrooms Iceberg, the Disturbing Website Iceberg, the M&M's Iceberg, the Gary's Mod Iceberg, the Internet Iceberg, the TV shows that should not exist Iceberg, the Baldi's Basics Iceberg, the Cryptozoology Iceberg, the Disturbing Media Iceberg, the Animal Crossing Iceberg, the Google Street View Iceberg, the Storytime Animation Iceberg, the Attack on Titan Iceberg, the Vocaloid Iceberg, the Mysterious Club Penguin Iceberg, the Complete Unexplainable / Incomprehensible Iceberg, the Do Not Research Iceberg in brackets NSFW, the Universe Iceberg, the Nefarious Pringles Iceberg Explained. Oh, and about 1 million lost media icebergs. There are literally tens, if not hundreds of thousands of iceberg videos, all of which are preceded by like 10 times as many iceberg charts. And from the beginning, it was never a one and done trend. It's not like one person would make an iceberg on a specific topic and then that topic was off limits. No, the complete opposite was true. For example, are you interested in Roblox? Well buddy, you're in luck. How about the full Roblox Iceberg Explained Director's Cut, the definitive iceberg on Roblox, covering a vast and all-encompassing array of talking points concentrated entirely on Roblox? No? Well, how about instead the Roblox Controversies Iceberg, a more niche iceberg within this already specific field, focusing entirely on the controversies and points of contention within Roblox? No, not that. Well, how about one of the many disturbing or strange Roblox icebergs? The Roblox Horror Game Iceberg, the Old and Forgotten Roblox Iceberg, the Dark Roblox Oddities Iceberg, the Worst Roblox Trends Iceberg, the Roblox Exploit Iceberg, the Roblox Lost Media Iceberg, or one of the seemingly endless pool of Roblox icebergs revolving entirely around specific games within the game of Roblox. Icebergs were now being made about topics within fan communities, within fan communities, within fan communities, like an inescapable virus that honestly everyone was pretty happy to adopt. Basically all of these videos following the same editing and narration tropes we discussed around the start of this video. All the same trademarks, all the same inevitable cliches, for the most part using the same template. Or at least that was until someone started doing something strange. On the 20th of November 2020, a new creator, Wendigoon, starts uploading a gigantic multi-part conspiracy iceberg explanation, with his series spanning over 21 different videos and totaling 9.5 hours in length. He chose to tackle this conspiracy iceberg differently. There were no fancy edits in Wendigoon's videos. There was minimal footage, if any, on entries. There was just him simply explaining entries to the camera with engaging narration until the iceberg was done. As you can tell by the size and success of Wendigoon's channel since he did this iceberg, his approach to icebergs struck a chord with people. Viewers seem to have a soft spot for an aficionado in a certain topic to just talk authentically about the topic they clicked on. No strenuous multi-month long visual or artistic production process needed. Which, if only. This more nonchalant and personal style of icebergs has grown considerably after Wendigoon popularized it, with videos like it making up a significant portion of modern Iceberg Explained uploads now. And that, my friends, was kind of it. That was, without going into painstakingly excruciating detail, the history of icebergs explained. From academic and philosophical roots in the late 1800s to underground niche 4chan circulation to immortal wide web memedom. This was Icebergs Explained. Congratulations, lonely traveler, you made it to the end of my video. This one took ages to make. I started Icebergs Explained the same week I uploaded my last video on bowling animations and have been chipping away at it every day since. Hope you enjoyed this one, guys. It's probably my favorite I've done so far, and I know I've talked about icebergs a lot today, so if you want to see how I think an Iceberg Explained video should be done, check out my iceberg on Mario Galaxy, just as a idea of the type of vision that drives someone to make a 40-minute video essay about funny images with red text and spooky pictures. Well, if you liked the video, you could always show me that by dropping a like or even subscribing if you want, but of course you don't have to. But I would love for you to construct a small poem and drop it down in the comment section. I genuinely enjoy reading people's thoughts on videos like this, positive or negative, and I'm hugely welcome to thoughts and critique. Well, anyway, I don't know when my next video will be out, as I'm now dealing with college and stuff. Hopefully it will be soon. But yeah, that's all I have to say today. Thanks a lot for watching, my friends. Hope to see you in the next one. I have been Lugalan. Here, have a troll face post-credit scene.